G'day friends and fans and other cool people who don't complain about my voice. Isn't that funny? The left can't debate, can they? They don't care about facts. They care about my nose, my hair, my white skin. You're just a cis white male. Did you just assume my agenda? Yeah. And of course, my voice. You can't come into Ukraine. You're not a Ukrainian. Neither are the 56,000 channels from India. But hey, here we are, right? Did I say 56,000? I mean, well, it just seems like every day one comes up, one goes down, one goes sideways. But there's a weird pattern. I'm sure you've seen it. And once you've seen it, or if you haven't seen it yet, I'm going to tell you what it is. And that is, as unemployment rises, they start manufacturing a war. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's hard to describe because news articles, unemployment fluctuates all the time. But look at the wars. You often don't see the manufacturing articles until it's too late. And then it's buried by... And you try to find old articles on the internet unless you've got access to the archives, which a lot of people don't. I don't have access to the... Anybody knows the... Well, there are some archives directly online, but a lot are behind paywalls. Actually, a lot of media today is behind paywalls. I think we're now seeing definitely more media going to hide behind paywalls because Google steals their content. It's not to stop you and I, it's to stop Google. It's why it's so cheap. Although I'm not paying them out of principle. But as the war continues, you notice, right, I think many have, that the amount of information is increasing and the amount of dishonesty is decreasing. Now, I'm not saying it's totally gone. I mean, Ukraine is going to be dishonest to the end. But fighting in Pokrovsk has become so intense and so critical. And it's such an important city, they can't hide that they're losing it. People know from internal displacement that people are leaving multiple oblasts. Stories are continuing throughout Europe to flood backwards into Ukraine because Ukraine forgets they can't block or won't block the BBC, and a lot of Ukrainians are turning to the BBC. And they may not see the truth, but one thing they do see is the difference between what Ukraine reports and what the BBC reports. And so they get more and more curious. And I know that a lot of the people lashing out right now, some of them call this war phony. The other day, I had somebody call this war phony. I think the 2 million dead Ukrainians would disagree with you. But Ukraine has claimed it's holding on to key positions in the city, saying that the Pokrovsk agglomeration continues. It's like, wow, somebody discovered a thesaurus. Somebody just bought Grammarly, right? Or saw a ad for... what's the new one? Scribe or something? Yeah, somebody saw an ad for AI and says, "Hey AI, write this article for me." You know, they're getting. Most of them are AIs. They, just sit there, highlight, go, "Hey AI, can you please rewrite this for me?" Yeah, look, ask an AI chatbot. You actually have AIs built into your word processors now. Well, actually, they're not built in. What it is, it's a link to them at the server end. You don't know this. How many of your word processors, browse, because you're on a browser, you're online, but your word processors, most of your spell checkers are nothing but an AI shell that sends and receives data. They don't actually do any spell checking. So if you lose the internet, they're useless. All right. So we have a discrepancy. The Ukrainian military says, everything's fine. Nothing to see here. Move along. Thank you, Chief Clancy. Meanwhile, the Russian ministry says they're pressing on and advancing and they've taken key positions. Now, what's funny, and we'll get to this later, so the Ukrainian military says one thing and the Ukrainian media says another. So there's a discrepancy between the military and military intelligence. Though, ask anybody who served in the army and they'll tell you that military intelligence is an oxymoron. As in, they're oxes with the mentality of morons. Alright, so, same with, Ukrainian Air Force also denies Russia's encirclement. They are actually claiming to dropping food and medical supplies to the trapped soldiers, although they say it's just replenishment in a timely manner. Is that what you call it? Okay. But Russians claim to have also destroyed drone boats, and Ukraine's anti-corruption agencies, yet again, an energy scheme, the state nuclear company. It's every week somebody's been arrested for corruption in so-called, there is no corruption. We go from Zelensky claiming the entire system's corrupt to a year into his presidency, I've cleaned out all corruption. There's no corruption in Burisma. To, they're all corrupt yet again. And it's like deny, say, then downplay, right? They deny it exists, then they downplay how bad it is, and then they admit how bad it is. Sooner or later, we're going to get to the point where the media says, the corruption is a good thing. Why cheating on your husband is a good thing. And then later, the women, they all have full of regret. 35 and full of regrets. It's like the wall for the win, It's like, we told you every time, They call us right wing. Yes, that's because we're right. We're right all the time. The left, they are always denying. They're left over. You take out the right, you get what's left. But the Anti-Corruption Bureau and the Office of Anti-Corruption Special Office searching officers. But guess what? They were helped by the FBI. They were tipped off by the FBI. But somehow, when the FBI arrived, most of the people who were wanted for corruption had already left after a phone call from Zelensky, allegedly. So much for fighting corruption. Okay, a street musician was arrested for short stints for anti-Kremlin songs. In Ukraine, she would have been tortured to death. Russia's come a long way in the fact that they do still jail people, but they don't execute people for thought crimes. It is a big improvement. Trust me, almost every country in the world jails people for thought crimes. Just go to number 10, knock on the door and say, 2-tier Starmer, are you home? You won't get more than, you won't last long. Oh, 2-tier? Ready to move out? Blimey, I bet you wouldn't even get to the door. I bet you suddenly crash tackled by a dozen guys who come out of nowhere. Literally. Now, most people don't know this, but most of Iraqi's oil is actually Russian oil companies. And it looks like they're adopting changes to their international operations under Australian US sanctions. Apparently, Bulgaria is going to seize the Russian oil company in their territory, calling it security measures. Germany, of course, is more money every day. They've suddenly find more money for Ukraine, but not for pensioners or national security. Now, this was written yesterday, but it came out after I finished recording. This is what Pokrovsk looked like yesterday. Many damaged buildings. Streets are empty. There's an eerie silence, according to some, that after fighting overnight, there was an eerie silence for hours. Now, this is described as a key fortress and logistical hub for Ukrainian forces. It's been under siege for almost 2 years. It's actually been under siege for a little bit longer than 2 years. But the front line has only been close to Pokrovsk in the last couple of months. It's been off and on under attack. I think Ukraine, well, I don't want to go to the map yet, but you know what I mean. There's been a pretty big gap. The Russians, for 2 years, have been working their way to Pokrovsk. That's the best way of putting it. But in recent weeks, tens of thousands have stormed the town. And they've come through around the clock. They've gone through buildings. And they usually return to their lines, which is weird. But lately, they've been sending in small soldiers. Now, according to this, the Russians have been coming in small groups and they get attacked and killed by Ukrainian soldiers. That doesn't sound right. You don't come in a large group and then suddenly come in small groups. No. This is what's wrong with the Ukrainians. They don't seem to be reporting a sensible war. But yes, Russian artillery, drones, glide bombs have been able to strike and destroy the most. As you can see, they disguise bunkers as buildings. Now they don't. If they were under attack by thousands of artillery pieces, that town would have been devastated within weeks. It's a very light war, but it is a very confusing one in that Ukraine is lying. You don't go from tens of thousands of soldiers overrunning the city to suddenly small groups roaming aimlessly and getting killed by Ukrainian drones. It doesn't make sense. But what happens is it's the worst setting weather. The most likely the reason why the soldiers did retreat from the city was the cold, going back to their lines and continuing. And the lack of foliage has... Really? I don't see a lack of foliage other than the streets. Yeah, here's the situation at Pokrovsk. The Russians have advanced. They have cut off Ukrainians who are trying... You have fighting at the train station for Pokrovsk. You have fighting from the Ukrainians trying to break through into Pokrovsk. You have fighting of the Ukrainians trapped in Pokrovsk. And you have fighting on the flanks of Pokrovsk. Right. We have drone strikes on Crimea, attacks on Russia. We have lots of unreported attacks, but we do have... Is that today? No, that's a day ago. Is that today? I think this one's today. Yeah, 2 hours ago, 119 strikes were reported on Ukraine. Odessa and other towns, Kiev, of course, Zelensky. We are winning the war, we're getting help, lots of help. And of course, it's just, yeah, Ukraine is fighting on the Ukrainians are trying to push back the Russians here at the buffer zone, also known as the Venus flytrap, also known as the Russian bear trap. Russia just has to say, here we are, and the Ukrainians come, But this is another Russian bear trap. Basically, the Russian bears are just dug in. Now, there's been fighting allegedly in Kupiansk, but when I checked, the Ukrainians said Kupiansk, the Russians said Petrovsk, and yet here we are on the Ukrainian map, and on the Russian maps, they say the fighting is here. So, why would the Kiev Independent say in Kupiansk? And again, this is Kupiansk. Now, this is what gets weird. This is Kupiansk Valory. And this is Kupiansk Kalulia. And this is also Kalulia and Katerina. So, you got 2, 3, 4, 5 independent areas. But when you zoom out, it's only 1, 2, 3. So it's got a bit of extras around it. But you also got similar sounding names. So like there's two. There's Kupiansk Kavilia and Volozhny Kavilia. And Kupiansk Volozhny, but no Novozhny. They overused town names over and over again. This is a Soviet tactic known as confusion. You also see this in, if you've ever been to Vietnam, you'll see area maps. You don't see area maps in most places still. But you'll see town signs on the side of the road facing the wrong way. You're driving up to a town that has no name. It's on the, right? Then you'll see on the highway, town names as you're leaving, from the north, all the town names, not from the south. They still do that today. They still only have the town names on the northern side of most towns. It's weird. It's a leftover from the Vietnam War. That's still in many towns. They still do not have their town signs on the southern side of town. I haven't been there in 10 years, so it could have changed by now. Okay, the Russians have made small gains up here. Some gains in north of Lyman, but it's very minor. I don't really see it, but they have claimed to have moved the front line. But it could be just that they've taken more of Doby or Droby. Same here. They're still fighting it, but shelling of Seversk has occurred. A little bit of fighting north of Krivishyi. Fighting around, but not in Crossed. No advances made. Fighting north of Myriad. Lots of fighting north of Myriad. Without any real, although small areas here and there, but nothing major or significant. Russians have entered Myriad, but not taken it. They've made little progress to the east, but to the west, in between the two towns, they've cut the road. They are fighting over Rivne. And again, as I said, the trapped Ukrainians are trying to fight their way on this side. those who are cut off, as I said. Hey, I said it long ago. Zelensky, I don't think Zelensky was involved in this, but one of Zelensky's men told the Kiev Independent that they'd moved, about 3 months ago, I think it was, had moved 10,000 troops into this town here. Now, the Russians were, I think, at Sevnenko at the time, and you know, everybody knew they were coming for Pokrovsk. Now, why they didn't enter or secure the road to Pokrovsk? Now, I thought they were involved in the counterattack here, and that could have been it, and that's why there was nothing. And of course, as you know, the counterattack here is wiped out. Okay, the Russians have moved up here since to cut them off, and that's really hurt Pokrovsk. And the Russians broke through the lines yesterday as we were speaking, and today we can see the result of that. They have taken that and other areas as well. But you can see the Russians in some areas haven't made much progress, or if any, but yesterday they also broke through the lines and took multiple towns here, and they're still fighting. The Russian offensive has reached Timu, apparently. Now they're on the southern end of here still, but they're fighting their way up to protect the flanks as they prepare to lay siege to Huli. They're cutting off the Ukrainian troops here. But at the same time, they've bombed the towns up here. As I said, this is a fortress. And of course, they've attacked Orlov, another fortress. Now, why Ukraine won't give up Pokrovsk is that it has a major coal mine in the area, but it's already in Russian control anyway. But they also have a airbase. They also have the rail line. It's the key flank to supply here. Okay, supplies. It was the middle, remember, of the Zelensky line, all the way through here. Okay, the third Zelensky line. It's supposed to, they've already taken Torsk and others. Right? It was supposed to stop the Russian army coming through here in a straight line. The Russians can't walk in a straight line. Obviously. They learnt from Alexander the Great, didn't you know? Alexander the Great was one of the originators of what's called the cavalry flank, which was later used by Napoleon, although he also used a tactic of roaming cannons, which was used against the French in Dieppe and the Siege of Saigon and many others, you know. It was used against the French and Americans and the Chinese. You know, military tactics anything you can do can be later done against you, and they're often so effective that you don't have an answer to your own tactics, right? The answer to most military tactics is, if you're on the defensive, you have to be overwhelming in your defense. And you have to have a sliding offense, right? You have to be able to go on the offense. You have to be able, if the enemy's coming to you, and look, we're getting more Russian attacks as the offensive heats up. So the Russian offensive is heating up and is ongoing right now. It is continuing. The Russians have obviously moving more men, more than tens of thousands. I would say right now the Russians may have actually mobilized the reserves out of Rostov or Lugansk. It's also possible that they relocated troops that were in Donetsk. But and that's but we see right now there's more fighting in the area. Now we're not going to sit here and watch the map because it doesn't update that often. But Ukraine, only in some areas the Russians have advanced, but these are key areas. And remember, if they burrow through here, right? Once this falls faster, right? Because the Ukrainians have less supply lines. The supply lines get cut off. They're not going to want to march through here. They're going to have to race through this road. They don't want to do it under fire. They want to defend probably in a line, and even that is going to be flat. Doesn't matter how they defend, north, south, east or west. They're too immobile. They're not mobile enough. They don't have enough tanks. They don't have enough air support. And they are clearly relying on Keir Starmer or Macron or Germany pulling the pin, or that could be Poland, and going to war. And thus dragging the world into hell just because my pride. Ukraine, you don't understand Ukraine supporters. Ukraine hates these people. Why would you? Ukraine is not trying to liberate these areas. They're trying to ethnically cleanse them. They've made it clear. Some of the Ukrainian supporters have made it clear that they love dead Russians. But you're losing more Ukrainians. But because it doesn't hurt the liberal establishment, they don't care. And if they don't care about Ukraine, you think they care about you? But of course, that's it. The liberal establishment doesn't care, and that trickles down to their voters. Just vote blue no matter who, right, folks? And then you just wonder why hell in a handbasket is just waiting to be delivered to your door. Now, this is strange, but has been verified from multiple sources that Kiev had an extensive operation, British intelligence had an extensive operation to hijack a MiG-31 and use it for provocation. And it's believed that Russian pilots have been bribed in the past to provoke and fly into NATO identification zones, such as the one near Estonia. The pilots were put on extended leave and thoroughly investigated. But this time, Russian intelligence made an arrest. The pilots told the FSB they were offered $3 million. I think they've been let off with a warning. But the FSB has made arrests of Ukrainian military intelligence officers. I don't know if they're going to parade them later today or what they're going to do. But apparently the plan was to get a MiG-31 equipped with a Kinzhal to fly towards a NATO airbase. And it's not clear whether or not this plot was to fire the missile or be chased away while armed with a hypersonic missile. But what they did was try to recruit 2 pilots, offering them a total of $3 million if they carried out the flight, because there's not 1 but 2, and if the other drifts off, they'll say, "Hey, Ivan, Yuri's a little off track. Go find out what he's up to. If not, we shoot you both down." So, yeah. Now, this is a large airbase in southeastern Europe. It's near a Romanian city. Now, of course, had it crossed the line, it would have been shot down by either side, the NATO, or why wouldn't it have been shot down by Ukraine on its way there? Or the Russians would say, "Hey, you're drifting off course, we have to shoot you down if you don't respond." But yeah, they admit that Ukraine and the UK was carrying out a large-scale provocation. it's been speculated that this is a direct support line for Ukrainian, a training base for Ukrainians, and is also believed to be where the Ukrainian Air Force is hiding out. People have reported daily flights and been told to STFU. And some people in Romania have been arrested for recording flights. How they know this? Well, as soon as you do a couple of uploads of anything controversial in the EU, the thought police will catch up with you very quickly. Don't believe me? They have a Ministry of Truth now within the EU. Literally called the Ministry of Truth. And it's run by the Guardian of all places. And of course, it's an office of the Ministry of Truth. It's so bizarre. We are reaching peak Orwell. We should not be putting 1984. It should be in the fiction section, not in the documentary section. It's not a political handbook, people. It's a warning. Now, a Zelensky ally fled Ukraine before an FBI linked search. The FBI tipped off Ukraine's to Timur Mitvich. Apparently he's a key figure in corruption and high-level organised crime, and may have been involved in certain elections recently in the United States, funding a certain controversial left-wing figure, and also been around Washington trying to drum up support from the neocons and linked to all sorts of people who don't want to be named, who are very litigious, who are wanting to increase the support for Ukraine. Now, apparently what this guy does is that he buys what Ukrainian... He buys supplies and stuff for the Ukraine, right? But he's allegedly a corrupt figure who allegedly was tipped off by senior officials, allegedly linked to Zelensky. Allegedly, Ukraine is too corrupt to join the EU, and the West won't admit it. But the Justice Minister says he's a former energy minister. He runs the state-run nuclear operator. He's apparently involved in Ukraine's plot for a dirty bomb. Apparently, he's also a bagman for Zelensky and others. Allegedly, he was on tape with Zelensky, and these tapes were confiscated by Zelensky in a raid on the offices. This is why there's so much controversy going on in Ukraine right now. But he has a business empire, which the energy sector, which is often a front, okay? Which is funny because the Nazis used the Munich coal plant and the Munich post office both as fronts for defense contractors to go around arms embargoes. All countries around the world who have these arms limitation treaties set up secret organizations within their energy sector for energy research. Remember, the Manhattan Project was a energy research project. Zelensky and others have attempted to usurp the authority of other government branches, claiming they're all Russian agents. Now, Russian forces have allegedly advanced in Kupiansk a short time ago. It says an hour ago, but this is the time of recording. It was an hour ago, but it was actually, this is, time has passed at the start of recording. When I was researching, it was fresh. They advanced in the train station. Well, there's allegedly 2 train stations. There's Kupiansk, and then, as I said, there's another one, which is another town. It's Kupiansk / and it's up. So there's 1, 2. They're like 2 kilometers apart or something. They race down the rail line along the fire road or supply road or maintenance road, whatever you want to call it, apparently they took control. The Russian assault forces broke through the line. Once they broke through the lines, found no mines, no second defences, nobody waiting for them at the train station. There were no ambushes. There was no idea whether or not where the Ukrainians have gone, but most of the motorised regiment was caught off guard, and the town is under control. Russian troops are now rounding everybody up. Some Ukrainians are still trapped in pockets and fighting, but have suffered heavy losses. And they seem to be unaware that the Russians had flanked them and were coming down the road. They had no scouts, no spotters, nothing. They had their back door open, basically. Sounds gayer. But, yeah. It does. It is totally weird. And now, of course, Ukraine is covering up this embarrassment. Now, it's not a big gain. Most of this territory was already under Russian fire control. Now, in an attempt to... Now, you may or may not believe that the Russians caught Ukraine trying to hijack or bribe one of their pilots to fly towards NATO. But in response, they hit the command center with a Kinzhal. It's an electronic intelligence warfare office. And Star crossed there now at the airfield. This is apparently where they plan to have landed the jet. Now, this is claiming the notorious F-16s. Yeah. But like I said, it's a touch-and-go operation. It's probably where they they probably come in unarmed, get loaded at these air bases and refueled, and go back to Romania for maintenance. Now, the battle for this is from last night, after I finished recording, when the Russians broke through the lines. This is what happened. Grad missile launches under the cover of darkness, which should not worry or affect Ukraine, but apparently their ground observation, Russia must have successfully jammed the British observation platform. And under the cover of darkness, as you can see, Grad, these are 122 multi-launch rocket systems. As you can see, that they launch one at a time, up to 32 missiles. And they've been going for several hours, hitting Ukrainian positions, until the early hours of the morning. And as you can see, they've advanced at different stages. And you can see the explosions across from the Russian observation platform. Now, you think on the other side, there will be replies. As you can see, as the explosions go off, the Ukrainians are not counter-battering. There is no counter-battery. This is what led tens of thousands of Russians to flood into the town and encircle the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians, during this barrage, were inside. They left their equipment outdoors, unmanned. They had no scouts, nothing to warn them. They did it in Kupiansk and again in Pokrovsk. If I was the head of Ukraine right now, if I was Zelensky, I would ask you, General, into the office and say, whose side are you on? I want the field commander's head on my desk. I don't care what you left the back door open, basically. They could have held back they were holding back the Russians. They might have lost a little bit of territory. They may have been able to successfully hold the Russians for a couple of more months and end this war. But now, because their lines have collapsed, this war may actually continue unless Zelensky calls it quits. Once the Russians have broken through the line, they're not going to stop. We saw this with Bakhmut. We could have ended this war if the Russians were held at Bakhmut. But once they broke the line, that was it. The Russians thought, yep, we can continue. The Ukrainians. And again, Putin on the edge of coming to an agreement. And what happens? The lines at Kupiansk break. Then the lines in near Huli break. Then we have the lines break at Kupiansk. And now we have the lines break again at Pokrovsk. Now, in other towns, you've seen the lines haven't broken. So there's clearly still areas where the Ukrainians have competent commanders, experienced commanders. They have people on watch. They have good scouting. They have good observation. But clearly, they can't tell when one of their town observation platforms on a town goes dark or is jammed or set to a loop or something. They got hacked, and the Russians, once they able to force the Ukrainians into their bunkers with a large rocket barrage, they just raced in because there was no warning. I mean, 2 kilometres. You go out and run 2 kilometres. See how long it takes you, especially considering hundreds of men, or even thousands, as the Ukrainians reported. But then the Ukrainians said, no, we killed them in small batches. They're not in town. Really? This is a pro-Ukrainian website. So you tell me, who's lying? Is the Russians lying? If the Russians are lying, what have they done? They've hacked the Ukrainian website because the Ukrainian intelligence, the Ukrainian army, the Ukrainian Air Force, the Russian media, not even the Russian media is telling the... This is so moving so fast that nobody's keeping up. Every hour, the Russians are moving the lines. Another town falls. There's 3 today. The large cities are not completely fallen, and the town just off Pokrovsk really don't count as a town, although it should, but it's more like a suburb, so they don't count its fall. Some of these small towns, they're too small to count. So we'll say 3 have fallen today. Not Pokrovsk or Kupiansk, but they're both on the edge, and they're both nearing the end. Now again, I think it's cold weather that is slowing things, but here we go. The Russians have made an official announcement that they fully occupy Novorossiysk in... Yeah. And so they've completed what they've rounded up the last of the Ukrainians in one town, and now they're moving on. So that's, as we speak, right now, as I speak, the Russians have taken another town, 4th town. They've rounded up the last of the Ukrainians trapped in that town, and the Ukrainian president is still claiming that the Ukrainians aren't trapped, and the Air Force is still continues to supply them. Yet, as you can see, no counter battery. That means they don't have enough tanks and artillery for their entire front line. Which means they should have shrunk their front line, which is the same thing the Germans should have done, okay? Had the Germans shrunk their front line and prevented the Russians' encirclement by retreating from Stalingrad to prevent the Russian encirclement and shrinking their front line at the same time, so that they have... so the Russians are coming funneled into a high fire zone instead of coming towards a scattered German army stuck in cities, unable to fire through buildings, giving lots of cover to the Russians to advance. Because once the buildings were trying to reduce the rubble, all you're doing is, you're just mounds of rubble just absorbing the artillery attacks. Pretty useless. Allowing the Americans, who recruited Russians out of Alaska and Siberia and trained them and shipped them back to Russia through Iran to defend Siberia. With the American officers retreating to Iran and than helping the Americans occupy Iran after the war. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, right? You would not think these things happen, right? Particularly in modern era, right? You would learn from the previous mistakes, particularly when you have fought them before on the same ground multiple times. You would think wait a minute, there's a back road, comes all the way around. You think we should defend it? Nah, the Russians don't know it's there, even though they've used it. How many times have they used it? It's like nobody seems to actually understand that Ukraine has reached a point where it's just killing itself for the sake of killing itself. Zelensky doesn't care. The liberal establishment doesn't care. So, anybody who says that they slobber Ukraine, yeah, go slob in Ukraine, okay? You slobs. Because you don't care about Ukraine. I bet most of them didn't even know Ukraine existed until 2022. Now, thank you all for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and please support the channel. We can support the channel on Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy my books, buy merch. All my links are in the link tree, description below, in my profile, or scan the QR code on the screen. Thank you. I really appreciate each and every one of you. And if you think got something to say, I'll give you a chance. But if you're just going to insult me, then you don't care. Okay, I've hurt you. If you come to my page to insult me, it means I've hurt you. And if I hurt you, it means I'm right.